It would be amazing if every time we went to dance tango, we got to dance with the most advanced, the most virtuosic dancers out there. It would be amazing to find a place like that where you consistently dance with a high level dancer with really, really good technique. But the reality is that most of the time when we go out dancing, it's a bit of a spread. It's on a continuum from people who are very technically advanced, very musical, to people who are just starting, and also people who've been dancing for a long time but have not progressed beyond a certain level. And as dancers, we sort of have to deal with that every time we go out dancing. We make different decisions about whether we're going to dance with someone or not. But more often than not, most of us will find ourselves in a position where we need to dance with beginners. And maybe they're a beginner, like they're just starting tango, or maybe they're a beginner in terms of they sort of never progressed past a certain level. How do you deal with that? How do you make that work so that you don't hurt yourself? It's fun. You enjoy yourself. You don't want to quit afterwards. It's not painful. Like, how do you make that happen? So I thought I would throw out some suggestions that have helped me to make those decisions and make it work for myself. And I also invite you to share some of the strategies that you have implemented that maybe help you to overcome some of the obvious challenges when you're dancing with a beginner. So pop those into the comments if you'd like, or you can send them to me on social media. I am so tango. I'm so tango. So why is it so hard to dance with beginners? I'm thinking maybe the answers could be different based on whether you're a leader or a follower mostly. But I think we can all agree that there's the technical component to the dance, and then there's also the musical component to the dance. Now, as a leader, when I'm dancing with a beginner follower, my advantage is that I am the one choosing the music, and I really choose the pace at which we go, which makes my options a bit more open, and I can do a lot of stuff within that. As a follower, it's a little different. If you're dancing with a beginner leader, most likely there will be a combination of things. There will be a technical aspect. Maybe their posture is not that great. They might not be stepping in the right place. They might have too much tone or not enough tone in their embrace. And on top of that, they a lot of times won't be really musical because they don't really hear the music very well yet. So as a follower, it's challenging in that way as well, not just the technical, but now musically speaking, you're also not like enjoying yourself because the person's not really dancing to the music. So it's definitely a little bit different for leaders and followers, but I think both would agree that the thing that makes it most difficult is when there is a physical discomfort or pain. That, you know, when I dance with a beginner, if they're not on the music, it's like, yeah, that's not fun, but you know, I can work with that. It's not a big deal. But if I'm dancing with a beginner who has a lot of tension or making me move in ways that are uncomfortable, then it becomes something that I have to deal with that's taking my mind off of the dancing. And now I'm having to sort of think about how to be comfortable. So I want to speak to that experience because I think those are the ones that are the most difficult to navigate in real time, right? Let's say that you were looking at someone and you thought they looked pretty good on the dance floor, and then you take the embrace and you realize that they're really not matching you in your level. They're a beginner, they're very stiff, they can't follow what you're leading really well, or they can't lead you clearly in the steps that you are trained in doing. There's a lot of guessing game. You're losing your balance. So those kinds of situations is what I want to speak to. And if any of these steps help you in those extreme situations, they will be just as effective in any other situation. So I wanted to kind of take the worst case scenario and speak to that. And then, of course, anything on the spectrum that you might experience, you can try these strategies and let me know how they work out for you. So the first thing I always say whenever I talk about dancing with beginners is to make sure that you pace yourself. There are certain people who feel obligated to dance with all the beginners, and they have a big heart and they really want to pass on that goodwill. But then they're doing it at the expense of their own well-being, their posture, their comfort, their tension. They start complaining about, certain aches and pains in their body. And they feel guilty about saying no to someone. But it is a fact that physically speaking, it's more taxing to dance with a beginner. Therefore, you have to respect your own limits and your own physical well-being, because if you don't, then you're going to be out of commission eventually for whatever reason, and those things build up. I mean, I talk all the time about how tango is already really asymmetrical, and in the years that I've been dancing it, it's created a lot of really interesting, more obvious asymmetries in my body, and that's already just built into the dance. So with time, you don't necessarily want to be so generous with your physicality, right? You might have to pace yourself based on what your body can handle and say no when you need to. Now, from there, the first thing that I always consider when dancing with beginners, whether I'm leading or following, is the music. And I know that as a follower, you don't have as much control of musicality, but you have more control of which tanda you dance with your next partner. So I am very cautious when it comes to which tandas I will dance with beginners. And I will turn down a tanda with someone if the music is just not appropriate. I really like dancing valse as a leader with beginners. To me, valse is a really user-friendly, beginner-friendly rhythm. And musically, it's a very happy kind of music. So I think it works really well to dance with beginners. So as a leader, if I know that there are beginner followers who are there and I want to dance with them, I'll wait for a valse tanda to dance with them. However, I know that not a lot of leaders, or maybe not all leaders, feel the same way about valse. I asked somebody if they would want to lead me on valse, a beginner leader, and they turned me down, saying that it was very stressful for them to lead valse. So you'll have your own preferences for music, but I would say if you know what kind of music makes you dance your best, makes it easy for you to feel connected, makes it easy for you to be creative and at ease. Pugliese and orchestras that are more abstract are definitely not the ones that I would choose to dance with a beginner. It really depends on your taste. So that's why I promote so much for everyone to get to know the music and really get to know your own preferences and what makes you dance well, which music really moves you, because it ends up being really useful in a practical way. So choose the music mindfully. As a leader, I typically will choose either valse or I'll choose something simple and rhythmic. So I will wait for tandas that have nice structure, very clear melodic lines. So Di Sarli, Orchestra Tipica Victor, Biagi. Some of those songs might be a little fast, so I typically like a little bit slower. So that would be my preference. As a follower, I will typically want similar tandas. I might be a little bit more open to some lyrical things, but still, I have a preference for those more structurally simple rhythmic tandas for my dances with beginners. Now, let's say you've picked a tanda that should work, and then you get inside the embrace, and that's where you realize that it's awful. There's tension. They're pushing and pulling on you. You can tell it's going to be painful. We've all had tandas like that where within the first 5 seconds, you're like, oh my God, this is going to be a really long 12 minutes. You know, it even gets so bad sometimes that you're dancing one song and you're like, oh my God, there's 3 more songs. And then the second song, oh my God, there's 2 more songs. And then you kind of lose track and you're like, oh, is this the last song? And then another song starts and you're like, oh, this tanda is never ending. So we've all had those tandas. And I'm sure we will continue having them because that's just the nature of it. So when you end up in that kind of an embrace, the first thing to do is look for ways to make yourself comfortable physically. And a lot of times, especially if you're feeling a lot of tension from your partner, it means that you find ways to not respond to the tension, to sort of dissipate the tension by softening inside the embrace. This could mean that if somebody's really pressing their head into you, that you catch that and you don't push back. You don't meet that tension. And if you feel that they're really pushing through their open side of the embrace, you actually relax and not push back. So looking for ways that you can both soften and connect with your center. So that means looking for ways to be more on your axis, prioritizing balance over aesthetic. You know, it's frustrating because I know that many dancers feel this way. We're perfectionists. We want to have it perfect on every step. We want to have the alignment correct. We want to have the perfect line and everything just so. But when you're dancing with a beginner, it's impossible. Your mechanics will have to adapt, which for me, it means I have to let myself do things incorrectly sometimes so that I land on my axis better, so that I don't strain my lower back. I kind of go into this more defensive mode of dancing when I'm in that situation. I do become a bit more dense. Like if I'm dancing with somebody who's got a lot of energy and they're trying to push me around because, you know, they haven't really gotten that sense of what it's like to not use their arms. You know, followers out there, you all know what that feels like. You dance with a leader, they're using their arms a lot. and they're just moving you around. And so in that case, I kind of think of myself like I'm going to become more dense and a little bit less responsive so that I buy myself more time to land on my axis more confidently. I'm going to prioritize, being really comfortable and let them deal with it, right? Like in their learning, in their evolution, they have to learn this. So it's a little bit of that energy of sort of withholding some of your intention and really being present with what you have to do just to be comfortable in your own body. Now, sometimes I know there's nothing you can do to make it comfortable, unfortunately. And I do find that's more often when I follow, that there's just nothing I can do to make it easier on myself. It's painful. And after that tanda, typically I need a reset. I need to go outside. I need to breathe. I need to do some stretching. So those situations will still exist, but it doesn't mean that you can't make it part of your personal exploration, let's say, of just seeing what are you capable of mechanically in your dance technique when you're faced with that kind of obstacle, because it's an obstacle or a challenge that everyone has to face at some point in their dance. So this is your opportunity to just kind of see how you measure up in that context. So I think of it that way so that I, find a different point of focus, because it's really easy to spend the 12 minutes hating every minute and just hoping that it will be over soon. And I still have those tandas from time to time, but there's definitely not been as many as before. And part of it is just because of the intention that I go into it with, and I catch myself before I get to that mode where it's just about this kind of torturous experience. So the focus that you have really, really matters. Now, another thing that you have to do when you dance with beginners, which I think is a little tricky, and maybe this is where most of the frustration lies, and that is having to give up your agenda of musicality. This goes for both leaders and followers, because as a follower, it can be really frustrating when you're dancing to a tanda that you really love and the leader doesn't know the music and they're not even stepping on the beat. So as a follower, it can be pretty annoying. I know that. As a leader, I have a bit more control. And when it comes to musicality with beginner followers, I really focus a lot on the slow beat. And sometimes I have to get rid of any other timings and only walk on the slow beat. And my mantra always with beginners when I'm leading is simplify. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Like ultimately leading a beginner who doesn't have a lot of experience with the music is very challenging when you know the music so well and you want to express it, and then you're dancing with someone who just cannot give you that experience. So you have to find something else in that moment. And again, it can be frustrating. I don't always succeed in focusing my mind on something other than how unmusical the dance is, because I'm dancing with someone who's not on the same level of understanding. But what helps me is if I think about beginners as like, they're like children. And I think of kids, somebody small who's learning something, and here they are showing off their skills. Am I going to point out of like how not on the music they are. And so it's kind of like a little mental shift for me to actually get into a mindset of being impressed with the fact that the person leading me already knows as much as they do versus how much they're lacking. And that's, this kind of classic thought experience of whether you're perceiving where you're at based on how much you still have to go to reach some other level, or whether you're aware of how far you've come to be at the place where you're at. And ultimately, I, as a seasoned dancer, as a teacher, when I dance with somebody who is a beginner, it's a reminder for me to appreciate how far they've come to even be at the place that they're at. So I suggest dancing with beginners. They're not going to be able to follow your really intricate musicality ideas. So ultimately, it helps to just simplify, walking on the slow beat without really doing a lot of different timings that you might want. So I just kind of have to clear that out of my head and focus on the simpler forms, simpler figures, something that they can do without necessarily feeling like they don't know what they're doing. Because I remember the thing that I appreciated the most when I was learning tango, and I hear this from other dancers as well, is that it's really special when your partner makes you feel like you can do nothing wrong, right? That feeling. And I've heard that. I've said it myself, that, oh, I love dancing with them because I really felt like I could do nothing wrong. And I think that experience, to give someone that experience, is a really valuable tool for them to know that they can do that, they can be in that state. So dancing with beginners, they don't really need to know everything there is to know about music in that moment. So as a leader, I always allow myself to kind of let go of that expectation. And I focus on the very basic rhythms of the Marcato in 2 and Marcato in 4, which I just taught in my webinar last Friday. And the Marcato in 2, the rhythm of Marcato in 2, is what I think the closest to approximating a natural gait that you have in your body when you walk. So it might speed up or slow down a little bit, but it should be that simple cadence of the walk. And whenever I take an embrace with a beginner, whether I'm a follower or leader, that's what I am intending to approximate, that kind of ease with them. Either I help them to experience it as a leader. So as a follower, I try to take very clear steps in the Marcato in 2 pacing with the music to the best of my ability. And as a leader, I lead that timing, and I try to give that experience of being at ease while being connected to someone. And that focus really helps the beginner dancer to feel more confident and to relax. I think what beginner dancers struggle with the most, and pop it into the comments whether you agree with this, whether it's something else you think that contributes to this nervousness. But I think a lot of the stress for beginners is just that feeling of like, oh my God, I'm going to mess up. It's not going to work. And when they feel that stress, if we speak to that and start giving them instructions or telling them something that they're doing right or not correctly or something, it's like it's just going to contribute to more of that energy. So what I think about when I'm dancing with a beginner dancer, instead of correcting them, all I'm trying to provide is an experience for them to feel at ease walking with me. And once the walking can happen at ease, other things can happen from that pretty easily. But before we begin walking together, nothing's going to work as it should. So we've gone through several ideas. One is to really pace yourself and make sure that physically and mentally, emotionally, you're in a good place to dance with beginner dancers. Say no when you need to, if you need to. Number 2, choose the music. Be mindful about your choice of the tanda that you dance with beginners, because that will affect your experience and your level of comfort. Number 3, really focus on your body's comfort, your physical comfort when you're landing, when you're dissociating. Make sure that you're not resisting or creating any extra tension in your own body. Number 4, let go of musicality. Let it just happen, even if you're not on the beat. It's okay, to the best of your ability. Just focus on walking with the other person and being with them to encourage that experience for them to relax into the idea of being at ease when they walk with someone else, because a lot of times there's that nervousness. And lastly, I think this will be an overarching theme for your whole experience, and that is let the mistakes happen. Letting the mistakes happen without thinking of them as mistakes. Frequently when we dance with a beginner, they're not going to do things correctly. They're not going to pivot correctly. They're not going to go where you want them to go. They're going to lead something weird that's not going to make sense. And frequently, you will know why it's happening. You will know what they're supposed to do differently. You will want to tell them, and they might even ask you. But my suggestion is on the social dance floor, not, when it's a practice, it's a different context. But on the social dance floor, don't treat it like a mistake. Just treat it as another possibility. I frequently will say it's an answer to a different question, right? It's a correct figure. It's a correct movement for a different thing, but it's okay that it's happening right now. And if you just let it happen and not treat it as a mistake, it provides your partner the opportunity to further let go of that nervousness. And you'd be surprised that when you can create that experience for your partner, it will automatically make it easier for you to dance, because on a physical level, remember what I was saying, the discomfort a lot of times is coming from the mechanics of something in the connection. Too much tone, not enough tone, too much pressure. And a lot of those things happen because of the nervousness and the tension that a dancer might be feeling. For beginners, they have so many things going through their heads, right? You remember what that's like. You have lists and lists of things, of watching in your body, how you're supposed to turn, and all these little details you pick up in class. So when you're first dancing, it's hard to relax and be present. You have all these things that are in your body. And the only way to get through those things is just to dance and allow things to happen. And I always say, just let yourself approximate what you're doing at first. Don't reach for the perfection. Let it happen how it's going to happen, and you will over time figure it out. So as a leader, I can very easily invite that in the follower, because I am in charge of the timing. So if I can simplify the steps and really focus on slow steps, and I choose a nice tanda, and I don't lead anything outside of my own level of comfort, my own mobility range, then the dance can actually be very fun and really pleasant. If I'm dancing as a follower, and I was able to, pick a tanda that's good, and I can appreciate where the leader is without having to change their musicality, and I can relax into the embrace so that they're not pushing me around as much. It's also possible that I will have a really good time. Now, again, it's more likely as a leader, I have more control over that than as a follower, but it's still a good approach to improve your experience as a follower as well. So letting the mistakes happen and reframing your idea around mistakes, I will use the famous description of Bob Ross, who said, mistakes are just happy accidents. So on that note, I will let you ponder all of these things and let me know in the comments what feedback you have, what your experience has been like dancing with beginners, and if you have any other tricks and suggestions for doing so. Before I let you go, I invite you to mark your calendars for August 17th. That's a Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m. Alex and I are going to be doing a live broadcast from San Diego Tango Marathon. We will be joined by the host of the Left Foot, Right Foot podcast, and we would love for you to join the live broadcast. There will be an opportunity to submit your questions for live Q&A session, and it will be an interesting experiment. So I will have details for you as we get closer to the date. But for now, just make sure that you mark your calendars for August 17th, 2 to 4 p.m. We'll catch you next week. Until then, ciao.